Of this series is to help build a community of students in the STEM majors and to and to increase retention of underrepresented students in STEM. So this series is being put on in collaboration between myself and the Chicanx Latinx Student Success Center and the SACNAS at SJSU Student Chapter. Carlos Gonzalez, who is here, is the president of the chapter. And so if you're interested in learning more, you can reach out to me or Carlos. Check us out on Instagram. Yeah, so I am Dr. Jessica Castillo Vardaro. You can call me Dr. Castillo for short. I am an assistant professor of ecology and evolutionary biology in the biology department. And so the purpose of tonight is to talk about why undergraduate research is important for STEM careers. So why you might want to get involved in research. And then we'll share some feedback from students that we've gotten about their experience as undergraduate researchers at SJSU. Then spend some time talking about how to find a lab at SJSU and how to find one that's a good fit for you. We'll go over how to craft a professional email to send out to professors, how to get what opportunities are available for paid experience and or credit towards your degree and what that looks like. And then we'll chat with some faculty who are going to visit us. So we have one already, Dr. David Enzinger. We'll let him introduce himself a little bit later, and then we'll have another faculty member visiting us, and they're going to share a little bit about what students do in their lab, and then we'll open it up to a Q&A. So feel free to ask questions at any point between now and the end of our time together, but we will have a time for a Q&A at the end. All right, so there are many STEM careers, lots of different paths, and no matter what you choose, having research experience is only going to help you. So if you're interested in industry, say like biotech, they're going to want to see that you have practical experience. So SJSU is really great and somewhat unique in that undergrads get real hands-on experience in the classroom. So you're very lucky because this isn't true everywhere. So our lab classes are excellent, and a lot of the Silicon Valley biotech companies, they know that. They know that you're coming out of SJSU prepared. But even so, if your resume is being compared to someone else who took the exact same classes as you and got the exact same grades as you, or even got better grades than you, having practical research experience is going to make your resume stand out. So practical experience and a strong letter of recommendation can go a really long way. It can make up for mediocre grades, for example. Also, unfortunately, due to COVID, a lot of our lab classes were online. And so getting into a research lab can really help you gain that experience that you might have gotten if we weren't in an online or hybrid modality. If you are considering graduate school, again, research experience gives you a major advantage on your CV. So a CV is like an academic resume. So faculty get tons of students applying for one or a few positions, and a lot of faculty will take a student with reasonably good grades and research experience over a student who has straight A's or straight A pluses and no research experience. So also, if your grades aren't super impressive and you're interested in getting a PhD, getting a master's is another really good route because it demonstrates that you have what it takes to do research at the PhD level. So having straight A's doesn't mean that you'll necessarily be a great researcher. And a lot of phenomenal researchers didn't get straight A's. So I never got straight A's. And so it's really being able to demonstrate that you have what it takes to be a researcher. And one of the best ways to do that is to have research experience under your belt as an undergrad. And perhaps most importantly, You will most likely be asked for a letter of recommendation at some point, either for a job or for grad school or a fellowship. And the best people to write you good letters of recommendation are your faculty mentors. So your professors in your classes can write you a generic letter, but they won't be able to talk about how amazing you are if you haven't interacted with them on a personal level. Which, side note, if you want your professors from your classes to write you a letter of recommendation, that's more than just a short, impersonal, generic letter, you need to go to their office hours and get to know them so that they can get to know you. You need to participate in class. Otherwise, they're just going to write you a very generic, basic letter of recommendation. All right, so we'll watch a short video. Actually, it's more of a medium length video about students sharing their experience at OSU or SGSU.
Hello, so my name's Carlos Gonzalez, and I'm a molecular biology major.
Hi, everyone. My name is Salvador Martinez. I'm a 5th year at San Jose State University majoring in biology.
My name is Tim Andrade, and I'm currently in Dr. Wilkinson's neurophysiology lab.
Hi, everyone. My name is Karina Amaya, and I am currently at Fresno State pursuing my master's degree in biology.
So my advice to undergrads who are interested in getting involved at research is start as early as you can. That's something that I wish I would have known about. I didn't really think it was something that I could do. I don't know why. Well, for me, it was also because I wasn't sure what major I wanted to stick with. I ended up switching from biomedical engineering to molecular biology. And then it was at that point where I realized I wanted to get involved in research. But yeah, that's my main takeaway for that is start as early as you can. That way, if you don't know, you can try it out. If you like it, you can stick with it. And if you don't like it, at least you know it's not for you.
The advice I would give undergrads interested in getting involved in research at San Jose State is just do it, go for it. Don't even think about it because it's an opportunity that can open a lot of doors anywhere you go. And it's a great way to put yourself out there and get out of your comfort zone. So yeah, I recommend it for anyone trying to do research.
Advice I would give to undergrads interested in joining in a lab is I'd say do it. I think being in a lab has made me feel more than a student here at San Jose State. It's my first semester here. So I feel like being in the lab, I've learned things I wouldn't have the opportunity to learn just being in a classroom.
And advice that I would give undergrads interested in getting involved in research would be, if you want to join a research lab, I would recommend to read at least one article with a professor that you want to work with and email them that you're interested in working with them, because an email can go a long way. And don't be afraid to ask questions. It's good to ask questions. I got over my fear of asking questions and I learned so much more.
I think I got involved at research because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do after I decided to switch majors. My initial plan was I got accepted here in San Jose State because I was in biomedical engineering. And I thought after I graduate, I would just work for some sort of tech company, you know, but then I realized engineering wasn't really for me. And then after I switched majors to molecular biology, I also started taking more upper division classes like general genetics. I think general genetics was a turning point, and I took that class and just became really obsessed and interested with like the molecular level of biology. But then when I learned about genetics and then specifically gene therapy and gene editing with CRISPR in my general genetics class, that's when I was like, wow, I should probably look more into this. And then that's when I found out about research labs.
The reason why I got involved in research at San Jose State is because I know a lot of companies actually look for research experience in a real lab setting. And I thought this was a perfect opportunity to get that experience going on as an undergrad, especially. So that way I can either pursue a career right after graduation or pursue post-grad degrees such as a master's degree or a PhD.
Okay, so I got involved in research at San Jose State because I want to pursue my PhD in neuroscience. So I knew getting into a research lab would make me more competitive when applying to other schools. And I knew I'd learn what it would take to be a researcher by jumping in and doing it, because you can only learn so much in the classroom, but to get into a lab, you see what it actually takes to kind of run experiments and just what it's like to do your own research.
So I got involved in research because when I was an incoming undergraduate student, I originally wanted to be a clinical laboratory scientist. And I figured what better way to get experience than working in a lab setting. But it wasn't until working in Dr. Wong's research lab that I discovered my passion for science. I enjoyed working with lab mates, trying to solve a question or a problem and collaborating with one another. But by joining Dr. Wong's research lab, I changed my mind and decided to do research instead.
What is the best part of conducting research at SJSU? I think honestly, it's getting to work with people in the lab and learning things from other people, whether it's my PI, Dr. Johnston, or the master students. Working in the lab, getting that hands-on experience is really nice, but also learning a lot about conceptual things like planning an experiment, the sort of more in-depth reasons behind why experiments are ran the way they are. You know, something that you don't always get when you're just taking a lab class. And it's something that I think really helps you prepare for going into graduate school. You know, it's sort of that next step in thinking about how to conduct science, you know, not just running through protocols, but actually thinking about the lab as a whole.
So the best part of conducting research at San Jose State University is that you're able to collaborate with a professor, and you're able to seek help and gain all that experience that you need in the lab setting while taking classes. So you learn new techniques and you can apply those to the classes that you're taking as an undergrad.
So the best part about conducting research at San Jose State is everybody in my research lab has been super helpful. It's not just me in here doing research. I've learned about programs that I've applied for. I've learned a lot about what it takes to be a good researcher, and the people I work with have motivated me to do better in my education.
But the best part of conducting research at San Jose State University, I would say, was having wonderful mentors guide me through my undergraduate career made all the difference. So having mentors like Dr. Wong, Dr. Rascone, and Dr. Stingmaster helped me pursue graduate school and higher education. And I learned a lot of new laboratory techniques such as protein purification, PCR, and enzyme coupled assays. And this was all a great experience because I was able to take what I learned and incorporate it to my research that I currently do now at Fresno State. And I was also able to travel to different conferences and travel to different parts of the US, which was so much fun. And I got to try a lot of different new types of food. So that was also cool too.
All right, so those are some of the reasons why doing research at undergrad or as an undergrad is important, why you might consider it. I sent out a survey and 19 students responded to my survey about their experience at SJSU, including 9 alumni and 10 current students. Of those students, most of them were biology majors, along with some chemistry majors and a physics major. So this isn't representative of everyone who does research, but these are the people who responded. So this is what these students had to say. So I asked them, why did you get involved in research? And the most common response was to improve career prospects, as well as to build a good CV for grad school, to gain practical experience, as well as out of curiosity. So it is totally cool to want to get involved in research for the fun of it and to learn more. Students said that they wanted to know if this path of scientific research was for me, wanted to be involved in something more than just schoolwork and challenge myself, develop fundamental lab skills that will be needed in my future career. I wanted to know what doing research was like and if I liked it. I wanted to get experience in real hands-on research that we usually read about in class. I was interested in learning technical and critical thinking skills that could help me in future jobs. So then I asked, what skills did you learn? And the most common skills that students learned were traditional lab techniques like pipetting and PCR. Also things like protein purification, gel electrophoresis, DNA extraction, cell culture, animal handling, data entry and analysis, microscopy, scientific writing, computer programming, coding, lots of different things. In addition to performing tasks in the lab, students also frequently have the opportunity to go to conferences and co-author scientific papers. So a lot of the current students either haven't been around that long or have had limited opportunities to attend conferences due to COVID, but 3 of them had attended a scientific conference, and 2 presented their research at a conference, and 2 are authors on scientific journal articles. And so this is really, really awesome if you get to graduate with a scientific paper under your belt. For the alumni, many more of them had attended a conference and presented their research. So this is great professional development experience, as well as experience in scientific communication and professional networking, in addition to all of the technical skills that you learn in the lab. 95% of respondents received course credit towards their degree. So I'm an academic advisor for ecology and evolution and BA students in the biology department. And so for those majors, you can use up to 4 units of Bio 180 towards your major elective. So this is the equivalent of 1 lab class. And so that goes towards your degree, towards graduation. And so this is something that you should definitely talk to your academic advisor about when discussing your graduation plan. Oops. 16% of students received salary from their PI. So this is pretty rare, but occasionally faculty will have grant funding for a project that they can support students with. More common is salary from another source, such as LSAMP, RISE, or other programs that will provide a small amount of money for you to do research. And we'll come back to talking about this in a few minutes. And then finally, a few students received grant funding. So there are a couple different options for applying for grants. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Dr. Castillo, can you explain what PI means for?
Oh, yeah. I think I put that in a slide somewhere. Yeah, so PI means principal investigator. And so that's just another term for the faculty member, the professor who is in charge of a research lab. Thank you. So students were asked what the greatest challenge they faced was. And by far the most common response was time management. So different labs require a different time commitment. So you need to find one that is manageable for you. But this is also a really good life skill to learn. So if you could manage your schoolwork and your time in the lab, that'll help you as you progress through your career. Troubleshooting was another one, and learning how to make mistakes and how to handle mistakes and failure. So these two go hand in hand, the troubleshooting, mistakes, and failure. So for example, I spent the entire first year of my PhD just troubleshooting lab work and trying to get it to work. And I got it to work. Everything was going great. I did my PhD. 10 years later, I'm here at SJSU and I have grad students, and I handed my grad students this protocol that took me over a year to work out, and it was working great. And then for some reason, it stopped working. And so the last 2 weeks, we've been troubleshooting this protocol. It still isn't working. It's really frustrating, but that's science. Also, mistakes will happen. So you'll feel really bad about it and get frustrated. But it's all part of science. It's what you do when you face these struggles. So when you make mistakes, it's always better to be upfront about the mistakes that you've made, because then they can be fixed. And as long as you learn from those mistakes, then it's a valuable experience. So students said, the greatest challenge for me is when I perform a specific procedure for the first time. It is scary, but once you get beyond that, it is very fun to be at the lab and performing your day-to-day procedures. Managing time, conducting research with school and work, getting acquainted with failure, not being frustrated when you don't get results because of all the time that you put in. This is definitely something that's true of science at any level. The mental burden of having to redo experiments because of a mistake you made. Having an experiment not work out the way that it's supposed to. On the flip side, when asked what was the best part of doing research, students answered contributing to science, the mentorship they received. So you'll have a much closer relationship with a professor who will be there to answer your research, academic, and professional development questions. Being a part of a team and feeling like you belong on campus, and learning things that are not taught in the class. Students said the experience of working to solve real-world problems, being a part of the coolest scientific team and conducting experiments on your own with PI supervision, of course. Being able to see what actually working in a lab is like. The most amazing thing about research at SJSU is the amount of hands-on experience we gain as undergraduate students. I have heard that in other research labs, the amount of hands-on experience is minimal. I've also heard this. Being able to find a meaningful place in the scientific community, working closely alongside other research students and professors, and improving my self-confidence in science. I really like this last one. Then asked, what advice would you give students interested in research? One of the most common responses was get involved early. So I'll talk a little bit more about this later. Just do it. Talk to people in multiple labs. This is another good one that we'll come across later. And it's okay to make mistakes as long as you learn from them. Try and understand why you are doing the experiments and the scientific significance behind each step, rather than just following the directions like a cookbook. Get involved as soon as you can. Don't worry about knowing everything. That's what prevented me from joining earlier. I thought I was not smart enough. Get your foot in the door and be bold. A lab may not entirely align with your interests, but you'll be surprised about what engages you and the skills that you will learn. Go in with an open mind and an eagerness to learn. Joining a lab is a chance to put yourself out there, and if you put enough work, you will be able to play a significant part in gathering and producing research. So of the alumni that responded to this survey, most of them currently are grad students. A couple of them are employed in industry, and a couple are applying to graduate school. When asked, how did conducting research help you on your career path? They said, I learned time management, working with others, and troubleshooting experiments. Conducting research helped navigate my academic path as I learned there was more to research in a professional and academic setting. I learned how to read academic journals and present journal articles in group meetings and gained experience and friendships that I will never forget. It helped me gain more hands-on experience and broaden my interest in furthering research myself. Academics itself was a challenge, but doing research made me realize how committed I was to trying to figure out the unknown. Not only that, but it made me realize that I could be a leader. It taught me vital practical science and research skills that have widespread applications and that make me a competitive applicant for graduate school. It also enabled me to build a strong support circle of different mentors and peers. I would not have gotten a master's or gotten into a PhD program if I hadn't started research. And it helped me improve my critical thinking and communication skills, verbal and writing. It made me qualified for my current job. And finally, students were asked if they recommended that undergrads get involved in research at SJSU, and 100% said resounding yes. Now, obviously there may be some bias in that only students that recommend it responded to my anonymous survey, but I still think that this is a resounding yes. So we've established why you should consider research. Now let's switch gears to talk about how. So first off, when should you start? Well, it's never too early to inquire. Students often think they don't have enough experience, but from the perspective of the professor, there's a trade-off between course experience and time you will spend in the lab. For example, some professors will require that you take general genetics or micro 101 before they will accept you, while others, like myself, would prefer students earlier in their career because it takes a long time to be trained on these lab techniques, and you get more out of your investment if students stay around for 2 or 3 years. So it really does vary from professor to professor, and it's never too early to start asking. That said, is it too late if you only have 1 semester left? Well, it depends. So sometimes faculty will take on graduating students depending on the projects that they have going on in their labs. So I've seen quite a few seniors do this, and I've taken a few myself. So it definitely doesn't hurt to ask, but just know that some professors may say no, and it has nothing to do with you. Also, so this goes back to what Lily pointed out earlier. So the term PI gets thrown out a lot. I started doing it without thinking it. It stands for principal investigator. It means the professor in charge of the lab. So how do you find a lab to join? So first, start with looking at faculty websites. This is absolutely the best place to start. Also, at least in the biology department, there are research open houses. This happened last month online. Basically, one day during the semester, faculty who are taking undergrads will have students available to answer questions and give lab tours so you can learn what goes on in their lab. And once we're back fully on campus, this will happen again. So keep your eye out for when that happens, but also don't wait for an open house, be proactive. And also I put together a list of faculty that are taking students, and I will share that with you in a bit. This is not an exhaustive list. It's only those faculty that responded to my survey. And just a side note, you should feel free to email any faculty member at SJSU, even if they haven't said that they are currently taking students. And faculty may ignore your email if they don't have time to read your email or they don't have space in their lab, but they will never get mad at you or annoyed at you for emailing them. The worst that can happen is that they just ignore you. So more on emails later. We'll talk a lot about emails, but you should never feel afraid to email a faculty member. So how do you find faculty websites? So you start at the department website. There should be a link on the department website for a list of faculty. And so that should have a list of all of the faculty in the department. And then there are links for each of these individual faculty members. And that will take you to their SJSU profile page. And then most but not all faculty have a link to their personal website. So for mine, there are a bunch of different tabs to talk about my research, give little bios about the people in my lab, what we do, and I have instructions for how to contact me if you are interested in joining my lab. And I know a lot of other faculty have instructions like this, so you should definitely check this out. And and check their website and see if they have instructions and read them and follow them before you email them. Because if you email them and you didn't follow their instructions, they'll probably just send you a link to their instructions and say, great, follow these instructions. So if you already have followed the instructions, it shows that you have done your research and you've put in some initiative ahead of time. And so they're more likely to pay attention. Okay, so before emailing a professor about research opportunities, look at their website. Read about the research being done in their lab. Usually they have a research page that gives general overview with links to publications. Look at the list of publications coming out of the lab. You could also do a Google Scholar or a PubMed search of the PI's name. And you should read a few of the abstracts for their papers. You don't have to read the actual papers, but you should have some idea of what research is going on. And so having some idea of what the products coming out of the lab is a really good idea. And then look on their website for instructions on how to contact them. All right, so before we go on to how to email a PI, are there any questions? David or Carlos, do you have anything to add that I may have missed?
No, I don't think so. I might have something to say once you get to the interview part.
Okay. Will the slides be sent out? So I will share a webpage with you that has some of these slides on them. It also has some resources, and I will show you that in a minute.
And as you can tell, we're recording this session as well. So it will be placed in the Centro YouTube, which I'll drop the link here in the chat in a minute, because you could always go back and rewatch the recording as well and share it with other students who you know might benefit from listening to this presentation. Dr. Castillo, can you also talk about, because I know we have maybe some engineering students in the space as well. And I think the process for looking for faculty and their research and their bios might be very similar, right? Going to their websites and being able to do a very similar process for looking up faculty that way.
Yeah, so every department website on campus should look very similar to what I showed you. They're not going to be exactly the same, but they should have a similar organization. So the university is actually trying to push us to all have the same websites. So you should be able to navigate that and find individual faculty research pages pretty easily that way. Okay, so how do you email PI? So there's a question, does it matter the year of the publications coming out? So coming out of the research lab, if you're going to choose one to look at the abstract, maybe choose the most recent one, or you could choose, the one that's most interesting to you. I don't know that it really matters if you're just trying to get an idea of what the lab does. But yeah, there's a question about, can I provide an email template? Yes, that's in like 2 slides. All right, so you found a lab that you're interested in. You've done your research. You want to contact the professor, but you're nervous. That's perfectly normal. How do you write a good email? So first, your email should be formal. Don't start out with, hey, prof. I get these emails a lot and I just roll my eyes. So always address a faculty member as doctor or professor until they tell you otherwise. So if you email me and you say, dear Dr. Castillo, and I respond sincerely, Jessica, I have now given you permission to refer to me as Jessica. If I respond Dr. Castillo, then you should call me Dr. Castillo. And so different faculty have different preferences. And so you should always start out being formal and then adjust your communication based on how they communicate with you. In your email, you should tell them why you are interested in doing research. Then tell them why you're interested in doing research in their lab specifically. And say something about the experience that you have. So your first email should be short and to the point. For example, say, "Dear Dr. So-and-so, I am a such and such year blank major. I am interested in getting involved in a research lab at SDSU because I would like to pursue a career in such and such field. I am particularly fascinated or particularly interested in your area of research because I am fascinated by some topic. Your research into blank sounds really exciting. I have taken such and such relevant classes, and I think your lab would be a good fit. Are you currently taking undergraduate research students? If so, I would like to learn more about the opportunities to join your lab." So for example, if you're emailing me, you could say, "Dear Dr. Castillo, I'm a second year E&E major. I'm interested in getting involved in a research lab at SDSU because I'd like to pursue a career in wildlife biology. I am particularly interested in your molecular ecology lab because I am fascinated by conservation genetics. Your research into American pikas sounds really interesting. I have taken evolution and conservation biology, and I think your lab would be a good fit." So we've taken this generic email, but tailored it to make it clear that you know what goes on in my lab and why you want to be in my lab. And also giving me a little bit of information about you. Other things that you might include in your email. If you have taken one of their classes, you can mention that. So you can say, "I took your evolutionary biology class and I found population genetics fascinating." You can attach your CV or your resume. A lot of students include transcripts, but if you give us your student ID number, we can look that up. So I wouldn't send transcripts unless they ask for them on their website specifically. And for your CV and resume, that's not required, but sometimes it's nice. And then don't expect a response right away. So we get 50 to 100 emails every day, and it just seems overwhelming the number of emails we get. So if you don't get a response, don't take it personally. If a week goes by and you don't get a response, follow up with us. Shoot us a short email that just says, "Hi, I'm following up on my email from last week and I look forward to hearing from you." And so all that does is put your email back on the top of our email list or of our inbox. And then we'll say, "Oh no, we forgot to get back to the student." And we are not going to get mad at you for following up on that email. And if we ignore your email, it's probably because it got buried on the third page of emails that we've gotten that day. So once you've made contact and are talking to a professor, how do you determine if it is a good fit for you? So the best thing to do is talk to current and former students in their lab. If you don't know any, ask the PI for names and contact info for their students, or better yet, ask them to introduce you to their students via email. So this is totally normal and they won't think you're being weird and they won't be offended by this. You can say that you would like to get a sense for what it's like to work in your lab. When talking to students in their lab, you can ask questions like, what kinds of activities do you do? What is the lab dynamic like? Do you like the lab organization? You can ask about the PI's mentorship style. This sounds a little awkward. You can ask, are they hands-on or hands-off? Do they micromanage? How invested are they in you and your well-being as a student as a whole? And would you recommend someone join this lab? So these are perfectly normal questions that it sometimes feels weird to ask, but they're really important to ask. And then you can also ask the PI what their mentorship style is like. They won't be put off. So these are really, really important questions to ask as a potential grad student looking for a lab to spend your grad career in. So it makes sense for undergrads to ask them too. It isn't as crucial because you can just leave if you decide that that lab isn't for you. Whereas when you're looking for a grad program, it's a much greater time commitment and you're investing a lot into each other. So these are really important questions at that stage, but also a good idea at this stage too. And finally, you should talk to multiple PIs so you can shop around. You won't hurt our feelings. We rather find students who are going to be a good fit in our lab than have you leave. You can ask the PI about support. What financial support opportunities are there, if any? Again, this feels like an awkward conversation to have, but it's a totally reasonable conversation. You can ask about mentorship. How often do they meet with undergrads? Do they meet in teams? Do they meet one-on-one? And then don't be afraid, or don't feel bad or be afraid to switch labs if it doesn't feel right to you. So we might be sad to see you go, but we're not going to be upset. If you find you're more interested in another research area or want to get a different experience, that's totally okay. So we aren't going to, talk bad about you behind your back for leaving, unless you were unreliable or didn't follow directions or did something egregious. So we're not going to tell another professor not to take you in their lab, but if another professor asks us for our recommendation, we're going to be honest. So we're here to support you and to support your education, but we're also here to support our colleagues. And I've mentioned paid research opportunities a few times. So receiving salary from your PI is rare. I've been able to do this a few times, but most of my students don't get funding this way. A lot of my students receive funding through LSAM. So you get a small stipend during the semester and summer for working in a research lab. It's like $1,000 a semester. So it's not that much, but it does help. There's RISE, the RISE program that pays you a salary based on the number of hours you work. So Carlos is in the RISE program. You can ask him about it. So both RISE and LSAMP are run by Dr. Karen Stingmaster in chemistry. And they're available to a bunch of different majors. So you can contact Dr. Stingmaster. There's the Cal Bridge program in physics and astronomy. I don't know that much about this program. The McNair Scholars Program is another good one that provides financial and professional development support. You can apply for an SJSU RISCA grant. This stands for Research Scholarship Creative Activity. You can apply with a PI. This is a new program, and I don't know how often it comes out. And then there's the C Superb President's Commission Scholarship. So you apply with your PI before starting your research. The application for this is due in February. And so if you haven't joined a lab before, this is a really good opportunity to get money to support you and your research. So as you're contacting faculty, you might want to bring this up and say, I'm interested in your lab, I'm interested in research. I'm also considering, or I'm interested in putting together a research proposal for the C Superb President's Commission Scholarship. So I have links and more information on the website that I put together that I will share with you. And lastly, there's some frequently asked questions. So how much experience do I need? Often none, but it depends on the PI. Usually your intro science courses. So like for me, if you've taken Bio 30 and 31, that's usually enough. What if my GPA is low? So most professors care more about your performance in a particular course than your overall GPA. And then how many hours a week do I need to commit? This one also varies a lot. Usually it's 4 or more, but it also depends on the PI. All right, so we're at 6:46. There is a short video that Dr. Kate Wilkin, who's a fire ecologist, shared, but I think I'll just post that one. And then we'll turn it over to Dr. David Enzinger and Dr. Ninkun Wong. They're going to share just a little bit about what goes on in their lab, and then we'll open it up to you all to ask the 4 of us questions. I'm including Carlos in that. All right. So I can stop sharing. I think, David, you have the ability to share if you want to.
Okay, definitely. Yeah, I have some slides that I can share. All right. Can everyone see that slide? Awesome. So, hi everyone. Dr. David Enzinger, and what my lab studies is stress physiology. Because as you can imagine, wild animals experience many different stressors in the forms of things like predation or noise. And the big thing is this can impact not only the individual that gets stressed, but if that individual is pregnant, like a pregnant fence lizard, that can also change the offspring in ways like morphology, behavior, and physiology. So the students in my lab kind of help with every part of this project. We'll go out and collect lizards using fishing poles with a little lasso on the end. And then we'll bring those lizards back into the lab where we take care of them. We're housing these lizards. So we're feeding them, we're making sure they have water, they're making sure their bins are clean, and just keeping an eye on their overall health. Because once they're in the lab, then we apply a stress treatment to them. Some of them will be our controls where they're unstressed, some will be stressed. So we'll use this pipetter to put a little drop of oil on their back, and that oil has hormones in it that will stress out the lizard non-invasively. It just moves through the skin. So we'll do that every night, and then we'll keep an eye for when the lizards lay their eggs and collect the eggs, because we'll take these eggs and then incubate them until they hatch. And once the lizards hatch, the undergrads and grad students will help measure them. So here we're measuring a limb length for the forelimb. Over here we're measuring the body length of the organism. And you can even tell what sex these organisms are by the presence or absence of scales here. So males have large scales that I teach the students to look for. Females don't have large scales. So this one here is a female. But we go beyond just the morphological measurements as well. We do behavioral assays where maybe you're looking at how a lizard responds to a novel object or what it does throughout its day. So here we're looking at how long does it take for a lizard to flee from an orange-tipped eraser coming towards them and at what distance. And that helps us understand kind of, are they anxious? Are they more fearful? But we also do a lot of physiology as well, because we're a physiology lab. So we do things like immunohistochemistry, where we're staining tissues, either muscle or brain tissues, for hormone receptors. And that way we can tell what density there is. Or we also look at immune function in the terms of white blood cell counts. So here you stain a little sample of blood, and you can tell apart the red blood cells, such as these red circles, from the different types of white blood cells. And the last thing we do in my lab is we participate as a group through doing paper discussions and having the students and myself lead talks about papers that we find interesting. We'll talk about and learn a little bit of coding so that we can analyze the data. So we use primarily R for that. And then I also have the students help with the writing of these papers so that you can be co-authors on this work and really flesh out the last bit of science, which is the writing aspect. So I'm there for now.
Awesome. I want to join your lab.
Right. Should I go?
Sure.
Very different. Our stuff is very different. So let me share screen real quick. Okay. So the beginning. All right. So my name is Ninkun Wong, and I'm in the chemistry department. I'm an in vitro biochemist, and we study things at the molecular level. What we care about is specifically this enzyme called SIRT1. And since 2017, a big, me and this group of intrepid young scientists have been asking SIRT1 how it moves. So why do we care about SIRT1? SIRT1 is an enzyme that is a lysine deacetylase. That means it takes an acetyl group off of a lysine, this amino acid in proteins. This seems like a really simple reaction, but it's really important
because that acetyl group is kind of like a flag, and it tells the protein to take one path instead of another path. So it totally changes how cellular pathways work. So it's not surprising that SIRT1 is actually involved in a lot of really important health issues in humans. You can see here, these are just some examples. When you make SIRT1 more active, you actually can help people be resistant to neurodegeneration. So people are trying to activate SIRT1 to combat diseases like Alzheimer's. Also, if you upregulate SIRT1, you can help with insulin secretion. So people are also trying to come up with small molecule drugs to activate SIRT1 and treat type 2 diabetes. These are just two examples. And so you probably noticed by now, people really care about how to make SIRT1 more active. But right now, people don't actually understand how SIRT1 works and why some drugs, some small molecules can make SIRT1 more active and some can't. And in our lab, we think one big key to this question is the movement of this protein. So if you've taken biochemistry or biology, you've probably seen structures of enzymes sometimes that are, this like nice folded 3D structure that's like a statue, but enzymes are not rigid statues. They move, they breathe, they're like living things. They move around a lot. And this movement is really important to its activity. And so we are looking at the movement of SIRT1 in two regions. One region is here, the stack binding domain. This is where a lot of those small molecules that people found already bind to the enzyme. And from some preliminary data, you can tell that the stack binding domain actually moves in and out like this. So this is just a compilation of a few structures people have gotten. But what does this movement mean? How does this movement translate to change in activity, and what kind of small molecules can make this movement happen? We're not really sure. And that's what this group of fantastic students right now are trying to understand. Another mystery in SIRT1 is further upstream in the very beginning of this protein, this region called motif A. You can tell that I don't even show a structure here, it's just a blob. That's because we don't know the structure. It's one of those regions of proteins that are called intrinsically disordered, meaning that it's like a shapeshifter. It can go from one shape to another based on what kind of function it wants. We do know that there are some shapes that it likes to assume, but like when it assumes what shape and what this shape shifting does, we're not sure. We know it helps SIRT1 activity. We just don't know how. Again, just don't know how. And so we have a group of students working on this region as well. And of course, our lab is always trying to recruit new students. So our next member of this intrepid lab could be you. And you can choose which project you want to really focus on. So specifically day to day, to answer these questions, the kinds of techniques you'll learn in the lab is a little bit of molecular cloning. We will make some mutations in SIRT1. Basically, we poke it and prod it and change things to see what happens, right? You're going to do a lot of protein expression and purification. SIRT1 is a human protein. It wouldn't really work to kill a bunch of people to purify protein. So we actually use E. coli. We coax E. coli to express SIRT1, and we purify SIRT1 protein out from E. coli. We pluck it out, and then we can do experiments where it's an ideal situation. We can control the pH, control the salt, control the concentration, and control what small molecules we throw in there. And that's where we start doing assays. So you'll learn how to do enzyme activity assays, where you get the Michaelis-Menten parameters. Basically, you get to characterize how efficient this enzyme is in what way. You'll also do a lot of biophysical binding assays where you're going to try to quantify how two different proteins or one protein and one ligand can bind to each other. And so these are skills that all of them actually just look like pipetting clear liquid from one tube to another. It's not as exciting as lizard stuff. But these are definitely skills that could help you, translate to if you wanted to go into a biotech company, pharma, medchem type stuff, or if you're thinking of grad school in the biochemistry, medchem regime, I guess. And thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thanks, Dr. Wong. All right, so we're almost at time, so I'm just going to do a quick plug for our next event, and then we'll open up to questions. So if people need to take off, that's fine, and I'll stick around and answer questions. And all right. So I put a link in the chat to this website. It just has a lot of resources that I went over today. So here's a list of faculty that are accepting students. It's an incomplete list, but here you'll find links to their website. So if you're interested in Dr. Enzinger's research, that is right there. So this is really useful. How to email faculty. So I have instructions and that template, some links to funding opportunities, and a link to that video and some of these slides. And then our last event of this series for this semester is we're having 2 speakers come share with us their personal journeys and pathways in STEM. So we have Robin Lopez, who is a PhD candidate at UC Berkeley. Before that, he was an SJSU alum. He got his master's in water resource engineering. He also got his undergrad at SF State and went to Contra Costa College. He's a Bay Area born and raised. He's from Richmond. He's really awesome, really inspirational. You should follow him on Twitter and Instagram at Hood Ecologist. And then our second speaker is Dr. Brian Castellano. They are currently the scientific program manager for training and DEI at Stanford. Prior to that, they were a postdoctoral research fellow at Genentech. So that is an industry postdoc. They got their PhD from UC Berkeley in molecular and cellular biology, and their BS in chemistry and biochemistry at SJSU. So I'm really, really excited for this event, and I hope you will join us. And so with that, I will just open it up for however long people are going to stick around to answer any questions. And thank you all for joining us.
Do we ask questions in the chat?
You can raise your hand, you can yell them out, you can put them in the chat.
I had a quick question. Yeah, so would you recommend applying to multiple labs at once just to, sort of increase the probability of getting accepted?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, and then it'll be okay if we reject them later, right? Yeah, just wanted to confirm.
Yes.
Can I chime in on that?
Yes, please.
I think as a PI, I'd almost prefer you to talk to multiple PIs and shop around. I don't think there's a wrong decision, but you want to find the lab that fits you, right? And we want you to be in the lab that fits you too. So I would definitely encourage you to shop around, and I don't think anyone would be offended by that. And
definitely not.
It's a little awkward dance at the end where both of you are kind of speed dating, will I take you? Will you come to me? But everyone understands.
Yeah, definitely. And also, after a semester, if you decide that you hate pipetting or you think lizards smell weird, then you can switch to a new lab. That's totally okay too. And yeah, just to be clear, David, Ninkun, Carlos, these questions are for anyone to answer.
Thank you so much.
Will you eventually be adding engineering research to your website? So I sent out my survey, and I think a couple engineering faculty got it, and it bounced back from others because I'm not allowed to email them. So that website is just the people who responded. So you should just email them. You should just feel empowered to send an email to any faculty member you're interested in.
Yeah, the College of Engineering website has their faculty, and you can do the same thing that Dr. Castillo showed of going to the faculty website and looking up different faculty with research topics that you find interesting.
Ooh, we got a question for mathematic majors. Do we recommend them getting involved in labs as well? And I'd say, yeah. At the very least, it'll be an amazing experience for the collaborative nature of it and just seeing what else there is in science. But there are components of research that apply to math as well, and more mathematical research as well.
Yeah, and even if the faculty don't have anything about research listed on their website, it doesn't hurt to ask.
Yeah, and one thing I would like to add for a math major, if you're at all interested in wet labs, what I call wet lab stuff, right? Like research in, a biology lab or a chemistry lab or whatnot, that right now is such a hot combination of skill sets in the market. So if you're, good at coding, good at bioinformatics, big data, but you also have experience in the wet lab, that's, like a lot of companies, a lot of also, academia would really like that, because if you only know bioinformatics, a lot of people, like those people sometimes will, propose things that aren't realistic in the lab. Like if you don't know, realistically, you can't get, like 100,000 of these experiments done in 3 days, right? Things like that. So I would say like that those two skill sets together would actually give you a leg up in the future for sure, if you're interested in that.
Awesome, I'm so glad. And this whole session will be posted on the Centro's YouTube page. I think earlier in the chat, there was a link. And I'm sure if you just go to the JSU Chicanx Latinx Student Success Center website and find it from there.
I would like to say one thing for those of you who might still be here, that understanding what your PI, what their research is also going to be helpful if they have interviews. So that way, during the interview, you can talk to them about their research, and it shows that you care about what they're researching, and it shows that you took initiative to, look into their research.
Yeah, definitely. If we get 20 emails and half of them are generic, and there are a few that show that they actually looked at what we do, we'll definitely pay more attention to the ones who we think are actually interested in our lab and not just any lab.
Because in our mind, that also increases the likelihood that you're going to enjoy what you're doing in our lab. Like, we want you to enjoy it, because that's going to help you do the work and help pursue your passion. So if you send us something generic, it's like, oh, do they actually care about this?
Yeah, and lab work can be hard and frustrating. Like a lot of the feedback from the students, like having to deal with failure and experiments not working. And so if you're not excited about the research questions, it's harder to come into lab every day and have your PCR fail or whatever your experiment is fail. But if you're really excited about the questions, then you're like, well, okay, what do I learn from this experience? How do I make it better the next time? How do I prevent it from failing? And so it's a lot easier to like look on the bright side of the learning experience when you're excited about the questions.
Yeah, I can add to that. When I interview students, I'm not able to take all the students who come to interview into my lab, unfortunately, right? Like I have to, the lab can't be too big. I do actually either give them a video of a research talk of mine or give them a paper and ask them to take a look at it. And then like when they come back, and so this is before the interview, when we email, and when they come back for the interview, I don't expect them to really like understand the science or whatnot, but I will always ask them if they have questions. And the response there tells me a lot about whether or not you're actually interested in this kind of stuff, or if, like if you're curious or not, if this is really your jam, it kind of can give me a feel. So yeah, that what Carlos said really does, it would definitely help.
Great. Thank you all for coming. And unless there are any last questions, have a good evening and enjoy your weekend and your short holiday week next week.